Hi everybody, I'm going to be taking you through today a little bit about hip hinging, which is really important if you have if you have a posterior pelvic tilt, but also just for anybody in general, because it's important to know how to bend properly in daily life activities. And then we're also going to do some glute bridging, and all of this is going to be based on your pelvic tilt. So whether you have an anterior tilt or a posterior tilt, it's going to require slightly different engagements or slightly different movements to assist you to engage better. Okay, so a hip hinge, if you come with me, I want you to find the bottom of your rib cage and your hip bone. Okay, so sorry, the top of my ribs, like the middle of my rib cage, and my hip bone. So I've got my fingers like so, and I want to maintain the distance between the two. Okay, so that means if I bend like this, it shortens that distance, doesn't it? And then if I'm extending like this, it lengthens the distance. So we want to maintain it, which means if we're going to hinge from the hips, it's like we're being karate chopped in the hips, then we're literally tipping like a teapot. Okay, and when we tip like a teapot, then we are safely moving through, not using our lower back, but our tummy muscles are able to do the work. And also our glutes get a special kind of length happen. So our glutes lengthen as we do this, our tummy turns on, and then our glutes engage to come back up. Okay, so based on what you've been learning with me with the core engagement, this is going to be really useful for you when you hip hinge. So if you take a 360 inhale, then on your exhale, you're going to hip hinge. And then from here, take an inhale, and then exhale to come back up. And what did you notice? Did you notice that your tummy muscles stayed more connected? Did you feel like your glutes turned on the way up? Does it feel different when you add a breath versus when you just go through the movement? Okay, so have a play around with that. Where in your day can you practice hip hinging? Stacking the dishwasher, emptying the dishwasher, pulling clothes out of the washing machine, which would be better off if you came into a squat position and did it as close to your body as you can, maintaining that same rib and hip distance so that you're protecting your back. Or same with loading the dishwasher or emptying the dishwasher, would be better to come quite low unless you're using the top rack. Some other ways that you would be hip hinging would be over a cot, like over your child's bed would be hip hinging. So these are all different ways that you can practice hip hinging in daily life, as well as, like this simulates a deadlift movement or a good morning exercise in resistance training. Okay, and this is really important to learn because if you have a posterior pelvic tilt, you're stuck in like a butt squeeze and you're stuck in this position. So learning to come out of that position is going to be useful for you when we come to do some glute bridging exercises on our back and any other stuff that requires that movement, like a squat as well. So same hip hinge, squat. So the only difference with a squat is that you bend from the knees, but your rib angle stays the same. Sorry, your angle here. So if you put your fingers on your ribs and your hip bone, hinge from the hip and then bend the knees, and that would be how to hinge into a squat position. All right, so you can practice that a little bit. So next up is coming onto our backs for some glute bridging. So you've already done your posture video, which went through which pelvic tilt you had, okay? And whether your glutes switched on first or your hamstrings. All right, so coming into your glute bridge. So when we're doing a glute bridge, you want your feet about 90 degrees. The further away your feet are going to be, it will be more hamstring. So it depends what you want the point of the exercise to be. If you have an anterior tilt, doing some extra hamstring work is going to be really important for you, but also working on your glutes. Okay, so the way that an anterior pelvic tilt person would do a glute bridge, so just feet 90 degrees, would be adding in a slight posterior tuck. Okay, so you can see my hips are at a bit of a tuck here, and then I would have the weight go through my big toe, my pinky toe, and my heel, and then I would squeeze my butt to hinge upwards. Okay, and then when I come down, I hinge, but I still maintain a little bit of a pelvic tuck, and then I squeeze to come back up. Okay, because if you have an anterior tilt, your natural way is actually to do it like this, and then that really is working more of your back muscles than your glutes. Okay, so if you have a slight pelvic tuck and then weight through the, so think of it like a tripod, your big toe, pinky toe, and your heel, and then you're going to squeeze your glutes to come up from there. Now, if you need any extra assistance with engagement, you could either place one of the booty bands around the tops of your knees, or you can grab a towel, like a rolled up towel or a block, and pop it between your knees so you can press into something and then squeeze to come up. And that can sometimes be really useful with engaging your inner thighs and also with your glutes. Okay, so you can have a play around with that. Now, if you have a posterior tilt, which is when your hips are really tucked under and your bum is always tucked, this is where the hip hinge is really necessary. So if you just let your back roll down into an anterior tilt, creating that arch slightly onto the lower back, and then go back into your posterior tilt, roll back into a little bit of an arch, and then find neutral. Okay, and we want to maintain neutral. So this is where we practice our hip hinging. So if you pop your fingers on top of your hip bones, you're going to imagine that they have like poles coming up towards the sky, and we need to keep them facing upwards. So if it's a flag pointing up at the sky, we don't want the flag to be tipping. Okay, so squeeze the butt, you're just hinging from the hip to press up into a glute bridge, and then hinge, so keeping the flags facing up to come down, and then re-squeeze to come up. So instead of your usual keeping your pelvis tucked the whole time, you're doing the whole thing in a neutral pelvic tilt and hinging from the hip. Okay, so this is going to be really, really important for you for turning on the glutes, for feeling the glutes work properly and getting the most out of doing a glute bridge. Okay, so they're your two exercises to practice: is hinging from the hip in daily life. Practice hinging before you squat into a chair or before you squat on the toilet, just pop your fingers. And then any glute bridging that you do, whether you're doing glute bridging in a program of your own or whether you're doing it inside of one of the on-demand videos, make sure that you are adding in, according to your pelvic tilt, which way you need to position yourself, okay?